Hi, welcome to Hopefully Here. I am Hope, and this is part 2 of reading reading a best book from every booktuber that I follow. I'm going to be filming this video in a couple different segments. Last time it was one big sit down and it was just a lot of talking all at once and remembering, and so I'm going to do it a little differently. I was thinking about doing this more vlog style, but I started to do that and then I haven't filmed anything vloggy in like a week. So I don't think the vlog thing is going to work out for this video, but I do have 4 books I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about them because one of them is overdue and I need to get back to the library ASAP, and I figured I would just talk about all the ones that I've read so I can take them all back and they're off my shelves because my shelves are packed with library books right now. Let us talk about the one that is due back, and that is The Coast Road by Alan Murin. And I am reading this book because it was on the best books of, I believe, Mercy's Bookish Musings. It was on her best of 2024 lists. I enjoyed this book. It took a little bit for me to get into because it started off slow and I wasn't sure I was enjoying the perspective of who I was reading from. You are following for a large portion. Her name is Izzy. And it's a small town in Ireland. Dublin. Small town in Ireland, and you're following a few different women who, one is a housewife and is married to a man who's in politics, and the other woman whose story is greatly impactful is Colette, and she is a woman who left her marriage to go live with another man and has since returned and is not being given access to her son, and it's how their lives get very messy and intertwined, and how in a small town people talk and gossip is a really big thing. And you're also at a point where a new referendum on divorce is coming up, and that takes a pretty, it seems like a side plot, but it's actually a pretty important point the book is being made, and it was done very well. And like I said, the book started out slow, but by the end of it, the pace really picks up. And the intrigue and the plot really picks up as well. And I actually ended up having a pretty good time with this. I thought this would be more kind of aligned with like Whale Fall or Clear by Karis Davies. And it did sort of have those vibes, but not quite. This goes a little bit further into plot than those ones did, I feel like. And what's actually also really great about this book is you're getting, I think you're getting mostly female protagonists and female points of views written by this man, Alan Murin. And he does, I think, a really fantastic job of writing these women and what they're thinking and the processes that they're going through in life as being wives and mothers and expectations and societal norms that are around them. So I enjoyed this book. I think if you like a lighter, more melancholy setting, but with a little bit of plot that gets thrown in at the end, you would enjoy this book. I had a pretty good time with it, and I was surprised with how much I enjoyed this one. And next we have just flat out thriller, and that is Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Caine. This came from Lily Reed's, I believe her name is Kenya. It was on her best of 2024 books. Let me double check that, make sure I'm not, yes, Lily Reed's. And this is the first book in a series where you are following a woman who comes home and realizes her husband is a serial killer. And she's got to kind of pick up her life. She's got 2 kids, and this past is just not leaving her alone no matter where she goes to. And ultimately it comes to a head in this book. I thought the story was really interesting. I actually thought it was pretty unique, which for a thriller is difficult to come by. It's an older book. Well, how old? It's backlist to 2017. So it is definitely one that has stood the test of time. I feel like is still very good even years later. I think still has points of view and unique twists that aren't being seen right now in thrillers, or at least the ones that I'm reading. I had a really great time, and I will definitely be continuing on with this series. I do believe Kenya said that this author has passed away, so I'm not really sure what the state of the series was in when that happened, but I will be picking up the second book in this because I'm definitely curious to see where the story progresses. It was definitely done well. Next up, from Katie Coulson, we have The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. This is a tiny little thriller book. You can sit down. This is a one-sitting book if you want it to be. And you're following a woman named do we not get her name? We might not get her name, I don't remember. She is a psychic, and she gets caught up in a mess of a family drama because she has an alternate job, which is not psychic, and involves men. And there are so many little twists and turns in this book. I had such a good time reading this. Gillian Flynn is one of my favorite thriller writers. Gone Girl is still top tier. You cannot beat Gone Girl when it comes to a thriller. And I was so excited to pick up. This is the last book by hers I hadn't read. It was part of a short story anthology, I believe, and it's been published separately. So we all need to start the Gillian Flynn needs to write another full-length novel petition, get on that, because she's so good at what she does. And I just had a really great time. If you're looking for something super quick, kind of thrillery, twists and turns, I would definitely say pick this one up for sure. And then, sadly, we have, I think, what is this, the second DNF on Booktubers Best of 2024 list, and that is Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson. And this came from Stalking Kafka. I believe her name is Jess, and this was on her Best of 2024 lists. Now, I knew going into this that this may not be a book for me, but I believe it was the only one on her list that I could get my hands on in a reasonable amount of time. And so just decided to give it a shot because I'm always willing to read a little bit outside my comfort zone. And it just seemed like it was going to be a little too character focused for me. I've definitely established I need plot in my book. And this is, I wouldn't say it's character, but it's really slow. And it's about a story of these two girls who are brought up by an aunt, a very interesting aunt, and how one of the sisters takes to her and the other one doesn't. And I really struggled with everybody's perspectives and kind of the problems that they were dealing with in life. For some reason, I couldn't grasp on, or I just wasn't enjoying the reading experience with this book. But I do think if you enjoy a slower paced, more, not that the plot is melancholy, but kind of the writing is a little bit slow and melancholy, then you would enjoy this. But for me, because it's not stream of consciousness, but it reminds me of stream of consciousness writing, I wasn't having a good time, and so decided to stop reading it. But I think if you enjoy that type of slower paced book, really looking at relationships, I can absolutely see why people would like this. It's one that I'm not surprised people like, and it is not one I'm not surprised I don't like, just because of the type of books I tend to gravitate towards. But I'm very glad that I picked this up anyways, because I always still like to check in and see where I'm going. And I got further along in this than I would normally have, but ultimately I decided it wasn't for me and put it down. But still very, very thrilled to have picked it up, and I'm glad that somebody and people out there are loving it. So that is the first 4 books that we're going to talk about, and then I will see you whenever Future Hope gets through another handful of these best books from 2024. Okay, we're popping in for another update. Let's start with the not good news, and that is another DNF, unfortunately. Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty, which I believe came from JD Ray Reads. I think I've only just started subscribing to her channel. I really, really enjoy her content, but I'm not totally sure where our tastes in books align and diverge. So this one I went in a little blind choosing, but I do like fantasy, I do like science fiction, and was hoping that this would be good for me. The thing with this book, first of all, it's massive. It just seemed a little all over the place for me. My head wasn't wrapping around the story, and I think it's one of those worlds, there's so many different characters where the further you get into it, the more it's going to make sense, and probably the better the book becomes. But I didn't have the patience to go through that, unfortunately, with this one. So I'm not saying it's a book that I will never pick up again. It could be one that I would come back to at some point. It's just not for me right now, unfortunately, and that's too bad, because she raved about this book and really, really enjoyed it. I'm sad that for me this isn't it, but I wasn't ready or willing to put in the time and effort into this book because it is so big right now when I was struggling so hard with it at the beginning. I decided to just count my losses and let it go. I think I got about 100 pages in before I decided it wasn't for me. And then we have Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. And this is came off of I'll put the name down here, but I think it might have been Books and Things. I think was the one I got this from her favorites of the year. And this is a weird book. It's really good though. It's very page turnery. It is, I think I was expecting it to go a little bit more dark than it did. And that's not to say this isn't dark. There are a lot of little terrible things happen to characters in this book, but they are, and while they are talked about on screen, they are not grotesquely talked about on page, which I appreciated very much. And so I think for me, I went in expecting one thing and got something a little bit different, but it still read really quickly and really well. It's a very propulsive story. You're following this woman named Sally who has some different societal interaction problems, and you find out why as you go along with this book. And then you're also following this boy, Peter, and you know pretty quickly why their stories are going to connect, but you don't really know how they're going to come back together. And I found that to be a really interesting. I just had a good time with this. I think I was expecting it when I first heard about this book. I thought it was a thriller mystery, and it's not really either of those things. There's a bit of a mystery sort of in it, but it's much more just about kind of a few characters who have had some terrible things happen in their lives, and they're dealing with it in ways that reads like a thriller but isn't a thriller. If you know, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think just in the way the pacing was done, it has a thriller-esque vibe to it, but it is not a thriller. I had a good time, and as I was reading it for the last time, I looked at the back. Sarah Winman actually blurbs this book, and Sarah Winman is one of my favorite authors ever. I will read anything she writes. So I had a really good time with that, which makes me happy because it's one of those books that I had picked up previously prior to this challenge and never got around to reading it because it had to go back to the library before I could finish it. There we have it. 2 more books knocked off the list. I have technically 4, but here's the deal. It's not gonna happen in this video challenge. It's just not. I'm not in the mood to even try to read through it. And I said that this was gonna be from Emmy's best of 2024 list, so it's not happening. I'm going to put that expectation to bed for myself and I'm not even think about it, which means I've got 3 to go, and hopefully my next update will include 1 to 3 of those books. Oh gosh, continue to wish me luck. I am ready to just power through these last ones and frankly be done with this challenge. I have another update. That is, I read Maurice by E.M. Forster, and this was from JTH Books, Best of 2024. And this is, I can't quite figure out when exactly this was published. It says here originally 1971, I think. 1971, but this was reissued in 2006. But it also feels like possibly somebody else has kind of come along and added something to it. I'm not totally sure what the story is with this. Clarification. It says in here, written during 1913 and 1914, but not published until 1971. Maurice was ahead of its time in its affirmation that love between men can be happy. There we go. That helps clarify it a little bit. I believe it's technically a classic, and it follows Maurice and who's the other guy? Maurice is the main character essentially that you're following, and he is in Cambridge, and he falls in love with one of his buddies, and it's their story through life. It goes through several years, ups, downs, and it's really interesting. Actually, I quite enjoyed it. I like the characters really well. I think that they were unique. I think it definitely writes of its time, which I appreciated because it was still very readable, even though it's very clearly not written in present day or modern day times. And I enjoyed this one a lot. It's not one that I had ever heard of before, but I always like when classics get put on my list and they are enjoyable reads. Definitely would recommend checking this one out because it's not one that I've ever heard anybody else talk about, so could maybe use a little bit more love. With that down, that means I had said previously that I only had 3 more to go. Turns out I have 4 more to go. Well, I had 4 more including this, so I still have 3 more to go. I'm reading one. I'm so tired. I am tired of this challenge, and I am not sure we're gonna come out swinging in this one. It might fizzle, I'm not gonna lie, but we will see. There will be at least one more update, and then I can call it quits. But for now, I'm gonna go keep reading. I am watching Leafs Penguins hockey game. It's been wild, having a good time. It's Sunday, so I'm just gonna keep chilling. And so with that comes the end of this challenge. It is ending with a fizzle, not a bang, and I'm so sorry for myself because I had really high hopes going into this challenge that I would be able to complete it. How do I even say this? The thing is, with a couple of the books still left on this list, they are in fact books that I really want to read. I just don't want to read them right now, and because there's so much on my TBR and so many books coming through with the International Booker and the Women's Prize, Canada Reads, my own TBR, just books that I want to read myself, I'm gonna stop the challenge here. I really enjoyed the process. I will probably do some iteration of this again next year because I did it last year as well. It just isn't ending with full completion, and I'm okay with that. The books that I haven't gotten to that I talked about are Prophet Song by Paul Lynch. Like I said, this book was nominated, it was nominated for the Booker, so it's actually been on my TBR for quite a while and is absolutely one I want to pick up. I think it's kind of a speculative fiction book, but I'm not exactly sure exactly where it goes, but it's got some political narrative to it. And then On Vicious Worlds by Bethany Jacobs. I really enjoyed the first book of this series. I read, I think, the first 40 or so pages of the second book, and I know I'm going to really enjoy this. I'm not in the mood for it right now, and just so I don't DNF a book that I know that I should enjoy because I'm reading it at the wrong time, I have decided to put a pause on it. Plus, as I'm reading through it, I need to do a little bit more research on, or just a little bit of a recap of book one, because a lot of things are happening that I'm not remembering very vividly from book one because it's been a while since I read it, and I think that would make the reading experience of this a little bit better. I did attempt the Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. It's not a book for me, so it's not one that I'm going to pick up again, but it is one that I have heard more than one booktuber talk about. And so I guess if you're a romance girl, could be worth picking up. It's just not for me. And then other than that, I believe that I've touched on all of the books that I originally mentioned in my first TBR video for this series. But there we go. On the whole, I would call this challenge a success. I really enjoyed quite a few of the books. A lot of them were books I never would have picked up on my own. It's always interesting because, like I've said before, there are booktubers that I watch even though I know our taste in books do not align. So it was really interesting to see who had the books I liked the most and who had the books I DNF'd or was a little middling with. And then there were a couple of new booktubers that, like I said, I wasn't exactly sure where our tastes overlap, and I will get to know them more over the next year. I have already started following more booktubers since I started this video, which just makes the list longer. I think next year I'm gonna have to change the rules a little bit for myself on this challenge to make sure it is a success. But as a whole, I had a lot of fun doing this, and I think for me, it just opened up the repertoire for books that I was picking up. I have already read, let me check my story graph. So I have already read 52 books this year, and a pretty large chunk of that is because of this challenge. Particularly February, I think I read like 26 books in February, and again, a lot of it was fueled by this challenge. I do read quite a bit, but even that for me is a speed at which I wouldn't normally be able to maintain, and I don't think I will be able to maintain moving forward. But like I said, super fun challenge. I appreciate everybody who did their best of 2024 lists, and I will for sure still be picking a couple of these up through the year, just not right now. So thank you so much for being with me through this journey. Like I said, I had a really great time, and I will probably attempt some form of this again next year, but we're gonna count our losses right here and go out with a fizzle, but also with me feeling okay about it. And with that, I go on with my day. Bye.